Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and joining us for this class on navigating parenting. Today's class is going to be about naming our feelings. And this is something that I thought was important to create a whole class around because in many of the different step-by-steps that I offer parents, and I also post a lot about it on my social media, I always say first to name our feelings. But using that term a lot and knowing that it kind of sounds basic, I also recognize that it's actually a foreign language for many people. In fact, it really was a foreign language for me when I first heard it. Even if it sounds like basic, sure, name my feeling. I'm feeling this, I can name it. The truth is that most of the time when we're in a challenging situation, when we're feeling reactive, we're feeling upset, it's really hard to, in that moment, name what we're feeling. The first thing we usually do is whatever it is that we do robotically, right? And so I think it's really important to talk about it. Also, because when we talk about conscious parenting, it's not just, in my opinion, learning what to do, the steps of like practically what I need to do. I think it's really important for parents to understand why we're doing it, because that's what then ends up helping us to break that robotic pattern. It helps us when we really understand why we're doing something. I believe that then we can actually integrate it into our lives in a different way, right? Because it can become really, truly a part of us. And I really, really believe that when we learn to name our feelings and teach our children to name their feelings, we can actually, it's just the beginning of learning how to handle challenges, situations that set us off and set our children off, learning how to handle them in a completely life-changing way. It really has done that for me, but it really was a foreign concept for me. And I will share my struggle with naming my feelings with you, a little part of it at the end of this class. So I'd like you to think, when you have a big and uncomfortable feeling, what is your primary first reaction? There may be different reactions you have to different sorts of challenges, right? But usually there are certain ways that we all react. Maybe we immediately shut down. Maybe we want to run out of the room. Maybe we yell, our voices get louder, right? Or we snap back, we say something that's unkind. We all have the different ways that we react to a challenge, okay? We're reacting because we're feeling a feeling, but we're not stopping to notice what the feeling is. We're feeling it, but we're zooming past that feeling into the action, right? So the feeling triggers us. And notice how I say the feeling triggers us, not the person who's standing in front of us. It's not our child or our parent or our coworker. It's the feeling that we have, which is our reaction to that challenge, that triggers us. And then we zoom past the feeling into our actual reaction, right? So learning to name our feeling helps us to kind of put in a natural pause so that we don't zoom into that action and react to a challenge in a way that oftentimes we regret, and definitely doesn't help us progress in our relationship with the person we're reacting to. Or, by the way, even a situation, it doesn't have to be a person on the other end, right? Something happens and it triggers us. We can't stop and handle it and grow from it and use that as an opportunity to, make lemonade from lemons if we're zooming past it into a reaction. So before we go into specifically how we name our feelings, I want us to back up and talk about why many of us don't naturally name our feelings. Why do most of us feel a feeling but don't sit with that feeling and zoom past it and into an action, right? Maybe you do naturally name your feelings and you don't realize it, which is really cool if you do. But even being able to now realize it brings it to the forefront of our consciousness and to the forefront of our interactions with our children. So why don't many of us know to do this naturally? Because it seems pretty basic, right? Simply because we weren't taught to. The truth is that many of us weren't ever really taught that our feelings were important as children, right? And maybe we don't realize that we're also not explicitly teaching our children that their feelings are important. We might think it, if we really were to think, are my child's feelings important? Are my feelings important? We might say, oh yeah, so important, super important. But in that moment, How important are they, right? If you as a child ever heard, or maybe even today, you might say when someone is having a big emotion, or you had a big emotion, if you heard as a child, oh, you're okay, right? Stop crying, stop yelling. I can't hear you when you're screaming, right? I don't want to hear it. Stop. Right? When in the middle of a big emotional reaction, we were sent to our room, we were sent out of the room, right? We were asked to leave the situation. When we were bribed or threatened or punished or rewarded in order to just pull it together, right? When we as parents or an adult in our lives when we were children would do or say anything to just get us to stop expressing, to just get us to stop tantruming, to just get us to stop crying or yelling or screaming. Those are all examples of an adult telling a child, or it can be an adult telling an adult, by the way, right? Your feelings aren't valid. Your feelings aren't important. Many of us, a lot of those, a lot of what I listed, I would expect we definitely heard as children, even if we're not using them with our children now. But remember, this is a non-judgmental space. The point isn't to make you feel like, oh my gosh, I have said that, because we've all said that. We've all been there. I've said that, and I've been there, and I still am there sometimes. The point of this is to bring it to the forefront of our consciousness. It doesn't mean we're going to shift into the perfect, there's no perfect, but a completely emotional aware parent or person overnight. But the more that we talk about it, that we think about it, right, that we awaken to it, then we can begin to integrate it into our lives, which is really the most important. So why did we hear all those phrases, or why maybe do we use any of those phrases today? And I'm sure there's even more that I didn't think about, because many of us were taught or believe that expressions of feeling actually isn't right. It's not the right thing to do to express how you feel in a moment when you're upset. You shouldn't express how you feel, right? Or there's something wrong with a child who's tantruming. Or, I see a lot on social media, some parents saying tantruming gets worse when you don't stop them. If you don't teach your child they can't tantrum, then they'll just keep tantruming worse and worse and worse. There's absolutely, it's not just about letting our child express. The rest of the equation is helping our children learn how to self-regulate. That's a totally different class. And I think I've even spoken about it in previous classes, right? But the truth is that it shuts down. It's telling a child you can't express yourself. A tantrum is just an expression of emotion, right? By having an adult, or by directing a child away from their feelings, asking them to stop expressing them, stop yelling, I can't hear you when you're screaming, don't be sad, be happy, don't be angry, right? Those are all ways that we were taught, basically, emotions aren't important. And the other thing, which I think is really key, is that there were many, many generations where expression of feelings, and it still is, right? It makes you vulnerable. But for many, many generations, and I think it's really more like a new concept, for that people say that vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of strength. But for sure, like my grandparents' generation and my parents' generation, and even today, many people view vulnerability as a weakness instead of a strength. And I think it's something that is really just now coming to the forefront of people's awareness. Actually, to be vulnerable takes a lot of courage and bravery, right? But because that's probably not how most of us grew up, it's still something that we struggle with, and still one of the reasons why this concept of naming our feelings isn't so deeply ingrained within us. Now what do we do, right? How do we shift out of this and into this space where we want to learn how to name our feelings, and also to teach our children to do that? And why is it so important? So we're going to get to that right now. We have to start to learn to think of our feelings as messengers or signalers for us, right? When we have feelings, those feelings are messengers for us to let us know something is going on. There's something about ourselves, right? Whether it be that something is making us feel good and happy, so we know we're in the right place. We know our needs are being met, right? We're good. Or we have an uncomfortable feeling, which is our body's way of alerting us that something's amiss. Maybe somebody's crossing one of our boundaries, right? We're being challenged. Maybe it's our body's way of saying, hey, I need some alone time. I need to process this. Okay. But our feelings are messengers, they're signalers for us, right? It's like if you were driving past a traffic light, okay? And the traffic light needed to show the red, right? Because you needed to stop. And if you didn't stop, you'd get in an accident. But suddenly the light goes away, or we're like, oh, that light's not important, and I'm just going to go through it. That's what happens when we don't pay attention to our feelings. It causes an accident in our lives, right? Either we push them down inside of us, or and then usually or we express them and we take them out on someone else. Or if we push them down inside of us, what I was going to say is eventually they come out in some way that's not healthy, right? Whether it be that it starts to affect us physically or our emotions in a unbalanced way and we don't know where it's coming from, chances are it's because we're just stuffing those feelings down. So feelings are messengers, they're signals for us, but that's it. They don't have to be something that's so uncomfortable. Feelings don't have to be really heavy. They don't have to be, they're not bad. They're there just as signals for us. So when a challenge happens, the first thing that happens is we feel something. Rather than run and zoom past it, we want to learn to slow down, notice it, and name it before we proceed. Right? So why is specifically learning to name a feeling so important? When we don't acknowledge our feelings, they don't go away, right? Like I just said, they either get expressed in hurtful ways to others. We may end up hurting ourselves in some way, and they can get pushed further down in our bodies, right? Naming our feelings is so important because it actually helps us to kind of ground ourselves in that moment when we're challenged and our mind is going all different places and we can't seem to, to calm down. If we can say, hey, okay, right now I'm feeling really angry, it kind of actually brings us back into our bodies. It helps us it's the beginning phase of learning to self-regulate. If your child is in the middle of a meltdown or a tantrum, and you can look at them and say, I see that you're really upset. What are you feeling? Can you name your feeling? It helps the child to start to come back into their bodies, right? Like, oh, okay, yeah, what is it that I'm feeling? Where am I feeling it in my body? A feeling is just a feeling. They're not bad, right? So I don't like to call bad and good feelings. I use the word uncomfortable because that's like what it evokes in our body, whether it's sadness or anger, right? Or loneliness. We feel uncomfortable in some way, but they're not bad. They feel overwhelming. They can feel all consuming, but they don't have to be. If we learn, how to name them, how to recognize them and process them. Naming the feeling, taking that moment. And I have it's this whole class around literally what can become like 2 moments of your life, but it's so important to understand why it's so important. Naming a feeling reminds me that, hey, I'm not that feeling. I'm not anger. I'm not sadness. It's not who I am. It's what I'm feeling right now. And we confuse that because we were told many times as children, you're so angry. Why are you so sad? Right? Stop being nervous. We are not the feeling. We feel things. Okay. It's what I'm feeling. It's not who I am. When we believe that the feeling is who I am, then that's what makes it all encompassing. Right? I'm feeling it, but it's not me. And when I know and recognize that the feeling is not me, I can move through it and release it. I don't always have to feel this way. Naming the feeling helps us to regain our power. Our feelings come from how we receive what others say and do. But when we learn to take responsibility for the feelings, right, we're no longer victims, and we can learn how to move through them, work through them. We're not placing the guilt of our feelings on anyone. We're saying, hey, I am angry. I am sad. I am nervous. It's not about my child. It's what I'm feeling. And that's a really hard thing to do because it's really easy in the moment to blame other people for our feelings. Because we don't want to admit we're feeling this way because we have this deep belief that uncomfortable feelings are a bad thing. And if I feel angry, there's something wrong with me, right? If I feel sad, there's something wrong with me, right? And it's just so much easier to blame someone else for it than to take responsibility and say, hey, how can I transform this really uncomfortable feeling inside of me? So It's harder when it's a moment when it's with another adult, but think about your child. Do you really want this little person in front of you, or if you have a teenager, right? But still, someone younger and smaller than you, to feel responsible for your feelings, to feel like your anger is on their shoulders, your sadness is on their shoulders. Do you really want them to feel that way? It puts the load on them, right? Which is so not fair. And then it can create so much for them too. Plus, you can never move through it. You can never let go of it if you don't own it, right? So, naming our feelings doesn't mean we're judging ourselves. And it's important to name that, right? We're not evaluating ourselves. We're not saying, okay, now that I'm naming my feelings, oh my God, I'm angry. Oh my gosh, right? What does that mean about me? It's a statement. It's just a simple statement. It's remembering that that doesn't make me angry. I'm feeling angry, right? It allows ourselves to learn to begin to love ourselves with our feelings, because they're not who I am. I'm feeling this, but I'm still here. I'm still standing. It doesn't change who I am. I'm feeling this because it's my body's way of sending me a message that there's something amiss. There's something I need to look into. Maybe a boundary was crossed. Maybe I need some alone time. I need to do something to nurture myself, right? The feeling isn't bad. It's when we take it out on other people or push them down inside of us, then it becomes destructive, right? Naming our feeling helps us to take responsibility for our feeling, which gives us our power back. We actually become really powerful beings in that moment, right? It helps us to be vulnerable, because vulnerability is good. Vulnerability is what heals us. It brings us down to this human level and allows us to become stronger, become brave, become powerful, to own ourselves and own how we feel. Conscious parenting is this understanding that I'm not a victim. I'm not a victim of my past. I'm not a victim of my present. I'm not a victim of my future. My life is in my hands. My children's lives are in my hands and their own hands. We can create anything that we want. We can create any relationship that we want. It is within our power. So instead of trying to get ourselves or our children to stop a feeling, we just have to learn how to name it. That's the first and such an important step. And I hope the importance, is understandable for you now and is relatable, and will help you to start to name the feeling, because it helps us, and of course we're here as parents, so we really want to create that space for our children. It helps them to validate their feeling, to validate their experience, right? Yes, that is really hard. Yes, I understand why you're feeling angry. And it's okay that they're feeling that way. It allows them to accept themselves with those feelings. But then it can also help them ground themselves back into their body, so that they can then learn to self-regulate. By the way, helping our children learn how to name a feeling and being okay when they hear other people name feelings helps expand their emotional intelligence exponentially, which is really what we also want for our children. We want them to feel and to be emotionally intelligent, because that will help them to, to thrive in a different way in the world. So what do we do practically? We want to start to get in the habit of noticing our feelings. And like I said, this may be a completely foreign language for you. It really was for me in the beginning. You can go online and find like hundreds of different feeling words. I used anger, sadness, and loneliness because those are like basic ones that we all think about, but there are so many words for feelings. And so when you're in a challenging moment, if you can get yourself to pause and say, wait a second, what am I feeling? What is that feeling inside of me? And you might want to, print out a list of feeling words and put it on your fridge or put it by your desk, right? Or hang it in your child's bedroom. A lot of times what's nice is at schools now, they do have like a little chart for kids that they can like say how, what level of anger they're feeling, or they have like a chart with a few different emotions, which is so nice. I don't remember that in my classroom as a child, right? But how do you feel? Think about it. Maybe you want to write it down and keep like a little log of all the different feelings you feel, because that's validating them too. Those feelings are absolutely valid, right? We're not saying like, oh, there's something wrong with the feeling. The opposite, right? It's recognizing that the feeling is valid. It's there, and it's important to give it that validity, right? Because then once you do, that's the first step to being able to learn how to grow through it and to overcome it, right? To let it move through and out of your body. You can get into the habit of asking your child how they feel. in that moment, right? How does it feel that your sister just interrupted you? How did it feel that they hurt your feelings? How did it feel when your teacher didn't call on you? Or how did it feel when your teacher did call on you and you didn't want to be called on, right? And you can offer your children some different like feeling words without saying, oh, I bet you, you don't want to say like, it looks, you don't want to say you were angry, but you can ask them, I wonder did you feel angry, or did you feel sad, or did you feel embarrassed? And your child may give you a completely different word for their feeling, which is also really cool and important to note, right? We never know how our child is feeling, and they will get better at it the more that you ask them how they're feeling, but get in the habit of asking them to name their feeling. And children will be so responsive to this, and even older children will be too, right? And even if they're not at first, you can share with them. Another great thing to do is when you're feeling a really uncomfortable feeling in the moment with your child, even if it's with them, rather than saying, you're making me so angry, or just getting angry, right? I'm feeling really angry right now. And it shows them that you're modeling, right? You're showing them that you are being vulnerable enough and honest enough to say, I'm feeling this way. You're clearly showing them that it's not about them, right? It's your feeling. It belongs to you. You can explain why you're feeling triggered like that in that moment, especially if you have older children. But honestly, I do it with my 4 and 7-year-old. They totally understand. So I really believe in the earlier you start having these kinds of conversations, even if they don't fully comprehend it, they're hearing you and they're understanding it. And you can ask a child from as early as they can really talk, right? I see that that something's going on. Your sister grabbed that toy out of your hand. How do you feel? What is that? What is the feeling that you're feeling? Can you name it for me? And they will start to calm down. You'll see them actually come back into their bodies and be able to start to have a conversation with you. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes you do need to give them space, but many times it really helps so much. And the more they see you doing it, of course, then they feel that it's okay and normal to do it themselves. And by doing all of this, we're learning to allow feelings, to accept feelings without judgment, to not try to fix or control or change anything, just to understand the feeling, just to give our child or give ourselves the space to have the feeling, right? To not push away from or run away from or reject the feelings, but just to have empathy and allow our children to have those feelings. And what's happening is that literally when we feel feelings, hormones are released in our body. Oxytocin, prolactin, I don't know if you've heard of those. Either way, what happens is literally physically, when we allow ourselves to feel feelings, then it's like we actually feel better. We can actually, if we can then lean into the feeling, and that's maybe another class, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but when you can lean into the feeling, then for I think it's like 15 seconds or more, you will feel the feeling start to dissipate. Like you don't even need that much more of it a lot of times, not always, but many times. So name the feelings. And I told you I'll share with you a personal example. I just want to let you know that if this does sound like a foreign language for you, it feels really hard or insurmountable. I used to be so uncomfortable. I was so out of touch with how I felt all the time. And whenever I would hear somebody else express their feelings, I would get so uncomfortable and like feel embarrassed for them. Like there's something wrong with them. A few years ago, okay, it wasn't even that long ago. Like it was so hard for me to be okay with feelings. Mainly, I'm sure, because I wasn't feeling my feelings. I was pushing them down and I wasn't giving myself the space and allowance to name my feelings. But what's so beautiful is now I'm getting better. I don't want to say I'm perfect at it, but I'm getting better at just being able to like be okay. Someone's really angry in my house. No problem. We're just going to allow them. And by doing so, by being able to allow them to name their feeling, the tantrum goes away so quickly. And when I allow myself to say, hey, I'm feeling angry right now. I'm feeling really angry right now. This really annoyed me. And like I said, writing it down helps. It helps because it helps you also, and I'm going to stop now. I'm not going to go into it, but it helps you to get to the bottom of it. Where have you felt that anger before? Why is it surfacing for you in this kind specific situation over and over again? Helps us go deeper. Not for today, But I just wanted to share that with you because we can all be there, we can all get there, and it helps so tremendously to create a life where we're in touch with our feelings, where we feel safe with being in touch with feelings, and it helps ourselves grow our emotional intelligence so much, and that of our children. So thank you so much for being here with us today. As always, I really want to hear what you would like to have these classes about. So feel free to message me through any platform. My email or Instagram are usually the best. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.